Hi, and thanks for taking the time to come and hear me speak, share some insights, ideas, perspectives, and perhaps even to ask some thought-provoking questions to help you get the most from this event. My name's James. I'm a recovering software engineer because you're never truly cured, but I focused on building technology companies, of which Rainbird is the fifth I've co-founded. My talk is called The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI, and of course, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy refers to the award-winning books by Douglas Adams. This is what Midjourney thinks Douglas Adams looks like sitting in front of the great computer Deep Thought featured in the books. Many of my images in this presentation were created using Midjourney, one of the leading generative AI platforms. A recent US legal case, by the way, has reaffirmed that these images are not mine. In fact, they're not anybody's. They hang in copyright limbo. I think this raises some important questions about whether other generative outputs may also have copyright issues in the future. But what is The Hitchhiker's Guide in this fantastic comedy? Well, The Hitchhiker's Guide was a book that served, and I quote, as the standard repository for all knowledge and wisdom. And that sounds a little bit like the promise of ChatGPT, doesn't it? ChatGPT is exceptionally useful and clever, but I'm going to point out something that maybe others won't, that it contains neither knowledge nor wisdom. And like most AI, it's making predictions, not judgments. And we'll get onto that in a moment. So let's start by really getting into the value of this. Look, here we are in a hype cycle around AI again. We've been having these hype cycles now for decades, thanks to the nuclear explosion that has been OpenAI and ChatGPT at this time. Listen, this buzz is well deserved. According to McKinsey, generative AI could add the equivalent of, well, you can see the numbers, $2.6 to $4.4 trillion of value annually. So look, I'm going to give you a moment to read this cartoon. It sort of encapsulates where we are. It's a bit like 10 years ago when we all wanted to build apps. What should the app do? I don't know, but we definitely need one. We sort of went through the same thing with chatbots, didn't we? It's like there's this unlimited budget for AI and an overwhelming excitement, maybe with a bit of panic about how best we can deploy it. Now, organizations are super eager to leverage these large language models, LLMs, which is the models that sit behind tools like ChatGPT, but they are struggling a little bit with some of the limitations. This includes the tendency they have to make mistakes, to hallucinate, and the fact that the outputs they're creating, which are predictive generated outputs, are not particularly easy to explain. Large language models are great at enhancing the user experience and efficiency of experts, but we have to be careful not to delegate decision-making to them. By the way, this is a different sort of hype graph. Does anybody have any guesses? Well, it's NVIDIA's share price. And for those that are not aware, NVIDIA make the chips that underpin these large language models, the models that in turn underpin tools like ChatGPT. But what is hype anyway? Well, hype is seeing tremendous value in the future, which we definitely see, don't we? And bringing some of that forward in time to today. And hype does make a lot of noise, but it also compels us to take rapid action. Doing nothing in this space is certainly not an option. And a serious exploration of understanding of AI is a must, not a maybe. And you're here, so I'm guessing you're already deep into that philosophy. There is clearly value here, and we have to figure out how much and where is it. And others are going to talk about this, I'm sure, a lot today. The good news is that the hype is moving now towards some considered conversation, but you do have to remain aware of the noise. You may have seen this earlier this year. A key advisor to Rishi Sunak has denied saying the world has only 2 years to save humanity from the threat of AI. But despite this, the fictitious comment was still echoed in much of the UK media. You can see how much excitement there is, but also that little bit of hysteria, anxiety, and panic around this topic. In fact, a professor at MIT said to me back in March when I was in the States, in 5 years, the concept of expert will be dead. Now, I don't believe this, and I think he was perhaps being deliberately provocative, but there is naturally an underlying fear of this disruption, which I think is felt by many, especially those that work in knowledge-intensive companies, the lawyers, the accountants, and so on. The irony is that whilst large language models are seen as a threat to some business models, it also represents the opportunity to innovate, particularly if you look at large language models alongside other AI technologies, to go beyond what ChatGPT can do alone and create a new generation of explainable and auditable AI models that encapsulate and can also scale knowledge. Now, have you seen this quote? We have to acknowledge that there is fear and that this new generation of AI will impact some workers substantially, perhaps more so in professional services than any other sector. So moving forwards does require a human and maybe an empathic approach to change. In fact, the analyst firm Gartner have been talking for a while now about how change management is probably one of the biggest breaks on this technology if we don't get it right. It's what really matters. Now, part of the problem in this whole AI space is that people misunderstand what artificial intelligence is, and specifically the word intelligence. AI is embedded in our culture from stories and movies like Ex Machina. Part of the challenge with the term AI is its definition is just a bit self-defeating. The term was coined by John McCarthy in 1955 and broadly is described as a computer performing a task that we thought of as intrinsically human. Now, if you think about this, the problem is when something works, it no longer meets that definition. This actually is known as the AI effect, and it's the reason why we don't recognize all the stacks of AI we live with today. You don't think of your sat-nav system as AI, but before sat-navs were common, they were considered AI, the same as chess playing computers before Garry Kasparov was finally beaten by IBM's Deep Blue back in 1997. It's almost like AI describes everything that doesn't quite work yet. Now, the other point to realize is that all AI we have in use today is pretty narrow in its application. We build tools that do very specific tasks. It's why it's sometimes called artificial narrow intelligence, narrow solutions that can be applied to specific problems. Artificial general intelligence is, in my view, still some way off, despite the fact that for some, ChatGPT can look a little like AGI. You can be talking about genomics 1 minute and Genghis Khan the next. But again, it has those limited some significant limitations that we must just bear in mind. So let's throw up a few definitions of AI. Well, I mean, the term AI itself has been around since the 1950s, and AI was never one thing. It's always been a rolling collection of technologies trying to prove themselves. The term machine learning is a bit like AI in its broad category. It's therefore a little bit unhelpful because it's also not one thing. But we can conclude that all machine learning describe systems that are using data to create algorithms without explicitly writing them. Symbolic AI, which I would guess most of you haven't heard of, is kind of the generation of AI that everyone was massively excited about before machine learning. It has to be explicitly programmed, and it works much the same way as we teach people. As I said, it was all the rage in the 80s and 90s, and governments were putting billions into it. The Americans, the British, the Japanese. People have just kind of forgotten that part of AI history, but don't forget about symbolic AI. And the current focus, of course, which I've chosen to break out separately because of the hype generative AI and large language models are creating. These are models that generate content, hence the name, but they really should be in the ML category, the machine learning category. Large language models like the one powering ChatGPT are machine learning based. Why is it important that you bear that in mind? Here's another cartoon I want you to just spend a moment absorbing. This is one of my favorite, but it's still very relevant today. This is the big challenge with machine learning. If I was to ask a machine learning algorithm, why did you make that prediction? And it could speak, it would say, you wouldn't understand because you don't speak my language. It's mathematical. Now, data science may argue that machine learning models are explainable. You can see kind of which parts that light up, but that's not really explainability. What we care about is what I call micro explainability. Can we explain the rationale behind each decision? That's pretty important if we're going to delegate responsibility to AI to make decisions of consequence. And frankly, when it comes to machine learning, we just can't. Now, while many have focused on what ChatGPT and other large language models can do to augment the work of expensive experts, and that's brilliant, that's fine, there are other more ambitious and strategic things that we can do. Most now realize that LLMs produce can't be entirely trusted. So we need an expert on the right of the process to interpret their results. And that's great because it's still adding to efficiency. But like all machine learning, large language models are making predictions. And that only helps if you are the subject matter expert capable of smelling the bullshit. And forgive me, I mean that in the technical sense. Bullshit is convincing sounding nonsense devoid of truth. And actually, machine learning has a bit of a history of creating it. So if we're to harness the power of AI to create new digital products and services, which I know lots of us are excited about, ones that we can rely on, we have to trust the technology. And this has been machine learning's Achilles heel. Why does this matter? Well, look, a quick history lesson. I present to you the humble microwave. These became popular in around 1979, 1980, but they're invented in 1945, just after the war. Why did it take so long? A large part of that was about trust. People had to trust them. Governments had to trust them. Some of the delay was because of regulation. My grandmother wouldn't have one in the house. She didn't trust it. My mother would have one in the house, but my brothers and I were not allowed to stand too close to it when it was cooking. Are you seeing the parallel? Adoption requires us to have trust in the technology and to some extent, regulation. Now, prediction is not the same as judgment. Hang on, ChatGPT can be asked for an explanation and it will give us one, no? They are, after all, generative. Is that an explanation? The bad news is, I'm afraid, is no, it isn't an explanation. It's the prediction of an explanation. I recently spoke to a Silicon Valley VC who had not clocked this point, and he'd made 3 investments in LLM companies. Not only can the answers look right and be wrong, or look wrong and be right, so can the explanations. These are not chains of reasoning. But actually, other forms of AI can create chains of reasoning. Now, because large language models are not readily interpretable, it's hard to know the difference unless you're the expert. And that's the point you need to remember. This is why many are focusing on turbocharging the day-to-day work of experts, not on using LLMs to automate processes, because they hallucinate and they are not explainable. Now, my view is the world needs AI it can trust. Explainability is central to trust, and trust is central to adoption. That's kind of the big message I'm trying to give you. Taking a quick look at this through the eyes of Gartner, this is their hype cycle for AI. You can see generative AI sitting right at the top, at the peak of inflated expectations. But there are other AI terms that are there also. At Rainbird, we're using all of these technologies to create AI models that can be trusted. This has been our work of some 10 years, and it's very much the future. If we actually look deeper at Gartner's research, we can see phrases like decision intelligence and composite AI. But hang on, these are in the same box as generative AI. What, do you mean that these other things are just as important? They are. But what is decision intelligence, and why is it so impactful as generative AI on the same timescale, and yet so few people are talking about it? Now, look, this is a big slide, and unfortunately, I don't have time to go into decision intelligence now, but it is important. It's on your radar. It's the science of starting with human decisions we want to apply our AI to, and then working back from there. People have been coming at this from 2 different directions, some with a 20-year data fetish, machine learning, and some by just trying to automate everything with rules. Decision intelligence is the bridge. It's the gravity that's binding these together, and accepts while data plays a role, we can leverage knowledge as well, which is what symbolic AI has all been about. We've got this macro challenge, right? We rely on people to make recurring decisions, and people aren't very good at doing that consistently. Every business is under financial and competitive pressure. We're all trying to find a way of building AI-powered digital products and services. Decision intelligence focuses on what you're trying to achieve and works backwards from there. As for composite AI, it has some specific technical meanings, but in the broader sense, it's combining different AI methods. In fact, if we take neural networks, which are a type of machine learning that leverages data, and we take symbolic AI that I said was about modeling knowledge, we can mash that together and make a new term, neurosymbolic AI. Frustratingly, this is also beyond the scope of what we can cover today, but very much the future of solving these historical issues we've had in AI, including explainability and cost. A Deloitte report in 2022 said that 94% of business leaders agree that AI is critical for success. And actually, it'll be AI-informed leaders like you that set the most effective organizations apart from the competition. But actually, 40% of those leaders today are ringing up analysts and saying, how can I govern the use of LLMs and AI? So governance is clearly on everybody's mind. Now, I may be the only voice today that you hear that urges caution about this particular challenge with generative AI, and particularly ChatGPT. LLMs are amazing. We love them. You should leverage them appropriately. In terms of innovation, time's of the essence, and this very fast-paced nature of this technology does put pressure on us, maybe even demand that we move quickly to take advantage of it. But if you remember just one thing from this talk, it's that predictions are not the same as judgment, and you need trust if you're going to get adoption. My suggestion is to go build something. Take a lighthouse approach, a common pattern to innovation, something that signals to others. Perhaps you create a human digital twin that enables others to tap into a source of digitized knowledge, to increase productivity, to create enthusiasm, to educate, and most importantly, to test all this before scaling to customer-facing applications. Showcasing your work to your teams will help them understand the impact your AI strategy is going to have on your people. AI is in the open now, right? Everyone's talking to their children about whether they should use ChatGPT for their homework. You have to consider how this is impacting your workforce. The ethics, transparency, issues of trust, fairness, accountability, governance, they're all going to play out in your business. And hopefully, if you go and create a lighthouse or two, they'll live those values and be shining examples. Have fun today. Thank you for your time. Please feel free to connect.